You ask why your healing presence feels like a threat to the broken. And I tell you that this paradox lies at the very heart of the human soul's encounter with light and shadow. Whenever the radiance of wholeness steps into a room where wounds have festered, it does not merely soothe, it exposes. Healing is not a gentle perfume that simply masks the odor of decay. It is fire. It is wind. It is a sudden shattering of old walls. And for those who have built their identities upon their brokenness, this revelation can feel like an act of violence. Imagine a prisoner who has long become accustomed to the chains around his wrists. The chains are not only objects of restraint, they have become a part of his body image, a part of his psychic narrative. To suggest freedom to him is not only to unlock the iron, but to dismantle the story he tells about who he is. And so he resists, he clings, he even lashes out against the hand that comes to free him. That is the paradox of healing. To the broken, wholeness is not merely hope, but thread. The psyche, in its depth, always seeks balance. The unconscious carries both the wound and the medicine, both the poison and the antidote. Yet, when one's ego has grown to identify with the wound, when one says, I am my pain, I am my betrayal, I am my weakness, then any intrusion of healing threatens to annihilate the very identity they have forged in the dark. Your presence, radiating a quality of integrity and calm, is unconsciously read as an accusation. Look, here is one who has dared to integrate their shadow. Here is one who has not been consumed by their wounds. And because the broken soul is not yet ready to admit that they too could walk such a path, they experience your very existence as an exposure of their self-deception. This is why healing so often provokes hostility. It is the same reason prophets were rejected in their hometowns. The same reason visionaries are often scorned until centuries later. Light, when it arrives too soon, blinds the eyes that have grown accustomed to the night. Consider the dream in which one encounters a luminous figure, a healer, a wise old man, a radiant child. Very often, the dreamer recoils. Instead of embracing the figure, he attacks it, flees from it, or wakes in terror. Why? Because the archetype of the self, which is the center of wholeness, carries an overwhelming luminosity. It is not merely a pleasant image, it is a power. And when the ego has grown small and brittle through years of woundedness, that power is experienced as threat rather than gift. The same dynamic plays out in waking life. When a person stands before you and feels your serenity, they do not consciously say, "You make me feel ashamed." But something in them knows, here is the mirror of my own unhealed fractures. And so their instinct is to push you away, to accuse you, to wound you, so that they may restore the fragile equilibrium of their broken identity. This is why so often empaths, healers, sensitive souls suffer rejection, not because they have done harm, but because they have brought presence. You walk into a room and your very silence carries the vibration of integration, but those who are split within themselves sense it as judgment, even though you have not spoken a word. They feel the stirring of their own buried pain, and rather than turn inward, they project outward They call you arrogant. They call you strange. They say you are cold. They say you think yourself above them. In truth, it is not your presence they hate, but the reflection it awakens. They are confronted with their own potential for healing, and that potential terrifies them. For to heal is not only to gain, it is also to lose. To heal is to lose the crutch, to lose the familiar patterns, to lose the beloved wound that has secretly provided meaning. How many have clung to their suffering because it gave them identity, because it gave them an excuse not to risk, not to love, not to confront the vast unknown of freedom? I have seen in my patients how often the wound becomes a hidden treasure chest of secondary gains. The melancholic man clings to his sorrow because it protects him from the demands of joy. The betrayed woman clings to her bitterness because it justifies her refusal to trust again. The traumatized child grown into adulthood clings to victimhood because it explains every failure and absolves every responsibility. In such cases, healing is not a gift. It is a thief. It threatens to take away the excuse, to strip bare the comfortable walls of justification, and to leave the soul naked before its own freedom. And so your healing presence is met not with gratitude, but with hostility, as though you were the intruder at a funeral who dares to sing. But understand, this is not a rejection of you personally. It is the old drama of archetypes, the eternal dance between the wounded ego and the archetype of the self. When you embody wholeness, if you carry within you the image of the self, and for the ego still clinging to its fractures, that image is unbearable. You become like the angel in dreams whose presence shakes the foundations of the house, like the storm that announces a new dawn. And storms are always feared before they are blessed. The thunder terrifies before the rain refreshes. So too your healing presence must often be first despised before it is sought. In this, you must learn patience. You must accept that not every soul is ready to walk into the light at the moment you meet them. Some require years of night before they can bear the first hint of dawn. If you are to endure as a healing presence, you must come to terms with this hostility. Do not resent it. Do not take it as personal betrayal. See it instead as a natural defense of a psyche not yet ready to dissolve its identification with brokenness. Just as the caterpillar resists the cocoon's death, so the human ego resists the disintegration that healing demands. Transformation always begins with threat. And so your role is not to force, not to argue, not to justify, but to remain faithful to your own wholeness. To heal is to stand as a living symbol, and symbols act more deeply than arguments. Your quiet persistence, your ability to continue shining even when misunderstood, will work upon the unconscious of those around you. Perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but in time, the seed you plant by simply being will stir. The unconscious remembers, even when the conscious denies. And one day, perhaps in a dream, perhaps in a crisis, they will recall the strange calm of your presence, and it will beckon them towards their own path of integration. But there is another dimension. Your healing presence is not only threat to the broken outside you, it is also a threat to the broken parts within you. For no healer is free of shadow, and often what we meet in others' hostility is the reflection of our own inner ambivalence. Part of you longs to heal, but part of you clings to the wound. Part of you shines, but part of you fears the responsibility that shining brings. For to be whole is not to be free of burden, it is to carry a greater one. The healed soul is no longer excused from life's demands. It is summoned to greater depths of love, greater risks of vulnerability, greater responsibility for truth. And so even within you, the broken fragments resist. They whisper, better to remain unseen, better to remain small, better not to provoke the envy of the wounded. And thus, to embody healing is to live in constant dialogue with your own shadow. You will feel tempted to dim your light, to soften your truth, to disguise your integration so that others might feel less threatened. But in doing so, you betray not only yourself but them as well. For they need, even if they hate, the mirror of your wholeness. So let me tell you, stand firm in your presence. Do not flaunt it, but do not bury it either. Know that hostility is part of the alchemy. When the broken lash out, see not their hatred, but their fear. See not their rejection, but their cry. For beneath hostility always lies longing. Though twisted and denied, the wound hates the medicine, but it also knows it cannot live without it. The psyche longs for wholeness, even as it flees from it, and thus your task is to walk with compassion, but also with courage. Do not resent their hostility, but neither should you surrender your presence to appease it. The healer must carry both gentleness and strength, both patience and resolve, for healing is not always comfort. Often it is disruption, often it is chaos, often it is the tearing down of what no longer serves, and those who cling to their ruins will curse the one who shakes the walls. Yet, in time, they will thank you, though perhaps not with words, perhaps only with the silent act of following the path you have already walked. This is why your healing presence feels like a threat, because in truth, it is a threat not to the essence of the person, but to the false structures they have built upon their pain. It is a threat to illusions, to excuses, to self-deceptions. And illusions do not die quietly. They scream, they rage, they accuse before they collapse. But once they collapse, the soul breathes. And in that breath, there is gratitude beyond words. Until then, you must endure the paradox that to bring healing is also to bring division, that to embody light is also to awaken shadow, that to live whole is also to be hated by the broken. This is the way of the archetype, the eternal law of psychic transformation. Do not be dismayed. This is the path of the healer, the cross you must carry. The paradox you must embrace, and yet let us not mistake healing for conquest, for there is no true healing in forcing another to accept what their soul has not yet prepared to receive. The psyche opens like a flower only in its own season, and when we impose the sun too harshly upon the seed still buried, we scorch rather than nurture. This is why I tell you, patience is not weakness, it is wisdom to walk among the broken with your healing presence is to understand that you are not their savior, but their mirror. You cannot live that transformation for them. You can only embody the possibility, and in doing so, awaken within them the archetype that already stirs in their own unconscious. Healing is not an imposition, it is an invitation, and invitations can be refused. But even when refused, they linger in the psyche, like a dream, half remembered, waiting to resurface when the time of ripeness comes. When I speak of the healing presence, I speak not of some external power bestowed only upon mystics or prophets. It is the natural radiance of one who has dared to wrestle with the shadow and emerge intact. It is the fragrance of integration. It is not your words, nor your gestures, nor even your actions that first convey it, but your very being. And being cannot be faked. You cannot pretend to have embraced your darkness without truly doing so. The unconscious knows, and others unconscious perceives. This is why sometimes, when you have done the painful work of acknowledging your shadow, integrating your wounds, and reconciling with your inner contradictions, you find that people react to you in inexplicable ways. Some are drawn to you like moth to flame, sensing in your presence a rare authenticity. Others recoil, accusing you of things you have never done, projecting onto you their own disowned darkness. You must understand, this is the language of the unconscious. They are not reacting to your surface. They are reacting to the archetypal resonance you carry. Let us take an image from myth. When the hero returns from the underworld, he does not return empty-handed. He brings with him a token, perhaps a jewel, a flame, a word of prophecy. But he also carries something else, something unseen. The aura of one who has crossed the threshold of death and survived. Those who have never made such a descent cannot help but feel disturbed in his presence, for he embodies what they have yet to face. He is proof that their avoidance is temporary, that one day they too must descend. This is the core of your healing presence. You carry the invisible mark of descent. You have entered your own brokenness. You have faced your own abyss, and you have brought back the treasure of integration. This mark is sensed unconsciously by others. Some will honor it, others will despise it, but none will remain indifferent. I recall a dream of a patient who once stood before a blazing fire. In the dream, he wished to warm himself, but each time he approached, his skin began to blister. The heat was unbearable, and yet, when he turned away, he felt the cold of the night piercing his bones. He was trapped between two realities, the cold of unhealed wounds and the burning intensity of the healing fire. This dream speaks to the human condition. Healing is not always gentle warmth. It is often searing flame. To step into the presence of one who radiates wholeness is to feel that fire. For those unprepared, it is intolerable. They retreat into the cold, even though the cold slowly kills them. Your healing presence, then, is the fire in their dream. You do not intend to burn them, but the contrast between their fragmented self and your integrated being generates heat, and that heat terrifies them. But it also calls them, for even as they flee, they cannot forget the warmth You must also remember that healing is dangerous. Yes, dangerous, not in the sense of harm, but in the sense that it demands transformation. To heal is to die to an old self and be reborn into a new one. And death, even symbolic, is never welcomed without resistance. Those who cling to their wounds know unconsciously that to let go is to lose the person they have known themselves to be. A woman who has long defined herself as the one who was abandoned cannot easily step into the identity of the one who has healed. For in doing so, she must lose the narrative that has justified her sorrow, her mistrust, her guardedness. The new self feels like a stranger, and so she resists. In this sense, your healing presence threatens not only their wounds, but their very identity. To heal is to undergo metamorphosis. And metamorphosis is always preceded by dissolution. They fear becoming the butterfly because it requires the death of the caterpillar. They hate your wings because they remind them that theirs are still hidden. Here is where shadow projection enters. Those who cannot face their own resistance to healing project it outward. They may accuse you of arrogance, of pride, of cruelty. They may twist your silence into condemnation, your strength into coldness, your compassion into manipulation. This is not truly about you. It is their own shadow, disowned and cast upon you like a cloak. If you do not understand this, you will grow bitter. You will say, "Why must I suffer for the light I carry?" But if you see it archetypally, you will recognize the pattern. The healer is always also the scapegoat. The one who brings fire is accused of being a demon. The one who brings freedom is accused of being a destroyer. This is the burden of presence. To carry healing is to invite projection, and the greater your integration, the more powerful the projections will be. Do not despair, for projection is not the end of the story. Projections, once recognized, can become bridges. For when another accuses you falsely, they are in fact giving you a glimpse of their inner landscape. They reveal what they cannot face in themselves. If you are strong enough not to retaliate, not to collapse, not to internalize their accusation, but simply to hold the projection with compassion, you give them the chance, however small, to reclaim it. They may not do so immediately. Most often they will not, but your refusal to accept their shadow as your identity plants a seed. In time, perhaps years later, they may remember, "I accused that person of arrogance, but in truth, it was my own shame of weakness that spoke." Then the projection dissolves and healing begins. But you too must beware, for you are not immune. Others' hostility may awaken your own shadow. You may feel the temptation to prove yourself, to argue, to force them to acknowledge your good intentions. That is your brokenness speaking, the fragment of you that still craves validation. The true healing presence does not need validation, for it rests in the deep, knowing that its wholeness is real, regardless of others' recognition. So when their hostility arises, take it as an opportunity to deepen your own integration. Ask yourself, what part of me is threatened by their rejection? What wound in me still longs to be seen? In this way, even their resistance becomes your teacher. Thus, The dance of healing and hostility serves both. They are confronted with their disowned wholeness, and you are confronted with your disowned wounds. If you endure them, both may grow. You see, the psyche is never static. It is a living, breathing mystery, always in movement between opposites, brokenness and healing, hostility and love, projection and integration. All are movements of the same eternal drama. Your healing presence is but one act in this drama, and its role is not to resolve everything, but to set the stage. You are the threshold, the reminder, the disturbance that awakens the soul to its unfinished work. This is why so often healing begins not with comfort, but with disruption. The dream that heals is rarely sweet. It is often terrifying. The analysis that transforms is rarely flattering. It is often humiliating. The presence that awakens is rarely easy. It is often unbearable. And yet, without these disturbances, the psyche would remain stagnant, circling endlessly in the same patterns. Thus, when your presence provokes hostility, do not regret it. Recognize it as the necessary first stirring of transformation. Think of the alchemical process. The vessel must first be sealed, and then the substances within are subjected to fire. The fire does not comfort. It agitates. It boils. It brings conflict. The substances resist. They clash. They release fumes. Only through this chaos can the new union be forged. So too with the psyche. Your healing presence introduces fire into another's sealed vessel. Their contents boil, their defenses clash, their wounds release fumes of anger, envy, accusation. This is the alchemical chaos, and though it seems destructive, it is the very condition of transmutation. Without fire, no gold emerges. Without disturbance, no integration occurs. Thus, your threat is also their salvation. In this way, you become both healer and alchemist. You do not heal by words alone, nor by gestures of comfort, but by embodying the fire of integration. You are the living proof that descent into darkness is survivable, that wounds can be transformed into wisdom, that shadow can be embraced without annihilation. This proof, more than any theory, awakens the archetype of the self within them. They may hate you for it, but their soul remembers, and one day, perhaps long after you are gone, they may find themselves drawn back to that fire, ready at last to endure its heat. It is essential to understand that your healing presence does not operate merely on the surface of human interaction. It reaches into the deep unconscious, disturbing layers that are older than the individual, older even than culture. You awaken archetypes, and archetypes are eternal. When the broken soul recoils from you, it is not merely their personal wound that resists. It is the ancient fear of transformation embedded in the collective psyche. Humanity has always feared the healer, for the healer is a threshold figure, one who stands between the known and the unknown, between safety and chaos, between death and rebirth. Think of the shamans of old, who were both revered and feared. To be touched by them was to risk being changed. and change was experienced as death. In your presence, the same archetypal drama is replayed. You are the reminder that life is not static, that the psyche demands growth, that wholeness cannot be avoided forever. And this reminder threatens the old order of the broken soul. Consider the figure of Christ in the Gospels. His presence healed, but it also divided. The same touch that restored sight provoked hatred. The same word that lifted the broken stirred murderous plots. For he carried within him the archetype of the self, radiant and whole. And such wholeness is intolerable to those still enslaved by the shadow. It is not coincidence that the healer so often becomes the scapegoat. The psyche must protect its fragile equilibrium. And one way it does so is by projecting its unbearable contradictions onto another. Thus, the community unites in accusing, rejecting, even crucifying the one who embodies what they cannot yet accept in themselves. You, too, will face such scapegoating. Your presence, intended for healing, will be experienced as accusation, and in their hostility, they will attempt to rid themselves of you as though you were the source of their disturbance. Do not be deceived. This hostility is a mask for longing. Beneath every rejection lies a hidden recognition. You show me what I might become, and I am not yet ready. But let us not dwell only on hostility. For your healing presence also awakens love. There are those whose souls, though broken, have ripened towards transformation. To them, your presence is like rain on dry ground. They sense in you not a threat, but a promise. They feel the resonance of authenticity, and it draws them near. They may not know why they are comforted by you, but they sense that in your presence they are safe to begin their own descent. For healing is not only fire, it is also water. It cleanses, it soothes, it awakens the dormant seed. And so you will find yourself both hated and beloved, rejected and embraced, feared and trusted. Do not cling to either response. Neither hostility nor adoration belongs ultimately to you. Both are projections, both are archetypal reactions to the mystery you embody. Accept them with humility. Do not let rejection embitter you, and do not let adoration inflate you. Both are dangerous if you forget that they are reflections of deeper forces at work. The danger of adoration is subtle. When others idealize you as healer, they may place upon you the burden of their salvation. They will make you the hero of their unconscious drama, and in doing so, they will resist their own responsibility for healing. This is as great a threat as hostility, for if you accept their projections of idealization, you may grow inflated, believing yourself to be more than human. But the archetype of the healer, when inflated, becomes the destroyer. Many who have walked this path have fallen into the trap of messianic delusion, imagining themselves to be saviors rather than mirrors. Beware of this. True healing presence does not demand worship. It points always beyond itself, back to the inner self of the other. You are not their solution. You are their reminder that the solution lies within them. To forget this is to betray both yourself and them. And yet, the hostility you endure may purify you of this temptation when some despise you while others adore you. You are forced to remain balanced in the tension of opposites. You cannot wholly identify with either. You learn to rest in the center, neither inflated by praise nor destroyed by rejection. This is the narrow path of the healer, the razor's edge between light and shadow. It is not easy. Many fall away, unable to endure the loneliness of being both feared and loved, both scapegoated and idealized. But if you endure, you will find that this very tension deepens your own integration. For healing presence is not static. It too must evolve, must continually descend and ascend, must remain alive. If you cease to integrate, if you stop confronting your own shadow, your presence grows brittle, hollow, and dangerous. Healing presence must remain rooted in authenticity, or it becomes manipulation. Do not imagine that to embody healing is to be perpetually serene. No, it is to remain perpetually honest. It is to acknowledge your own darkness, even as you radiate light. It is to admit your wounds, even as you carry medicine. It is to know that healing is not perfection, but wholeness. And wholeness includes contradiction. When others sense this in you, when they feel that you do not deny your shadow but carry it consciously, they feel safe, for nothing is more terrifying than one who pretends to be pure. Purity is brittle. It shatters under the weight of reality. Wholeness, by contrast, bends but does not break. The healer who has embraced their own contradictions carries a presence that says, you too may be broken, and still you may be whole. This paradox comforts those who are ready, even as it threatens those who are not. The unconscious speaks in images, and I will give you one. Imagine a forest after a storm, branchiously broken. The ground is wet, the air heavy with the scent of upheaval. Yet amidst the chaos, new shoots emerge, green and tender. The storm has not only destroyed, it has also cleared space for growth. So too with your healing presence, you are the storm that breaks illusions, that scatters defenses, that leaves the ground raw and open. But you are also the quiet air after the storm, carrying the promise of renewal. To those who cling to their dead branches, you are the threat of destruction. To those who long for growth, you are the promise of life. Both reactions are true, and both must be endured. In this way, healing presence is itself an archetype. The archetype of the wounded healer. You are not healer because you are flawless. You are healer because you have been wounded and have dared to heal. Your wounds remain part of you, not erased, but transfigured. They are the very channels through which your presence flows. Others sense this. They sense that you have suffered, that you have descended, that you have walked in darkness. This gives authenticity to your light. Without wounds, your healing would be sterile. It would lack resonance. But with wounds, integrated and transformed, your presence carry depth. It is the depth they both long for and fear, for your wounds remind them of their own, and your healing reminds them of what they have not yet embraced. Thus, you are both mirror, and threat. Both comfort and disruption. Let me tell you of another dream. A woman dreamed she was carrying a lantern through a dark forest. The light illuminated the trees around her, but as she walked, wolves began to follow. At first, she thought they were drawn to the light, but soon she realized they were drawn to her vulnerability. They circled, snarling, as though ready to devour her. Yet, the dream ended not with her being devoured, but with her standing still, raising the lantern high, and the wolves retreating into the shadows. This dream is the symbol of healing presence. The light you carry will draw both the broken and the hostile. Some will be comforted, some will seek to devour, but if you remain steady, if you hold your light without fear, even the wolves will retreat. For in truth, their hostility masks their awe. They fear the light, but they cannot destroy it. They can only test whether it will endure. So when you ask why your healing presence feels like a threat, know that it is because healing itself is threatening. To be whole is to confront death, shadow, contradiction, and transformation. Most souls would rather remain in the familiar pain than risk the unknown of wholeness. And so they resist, but resistance is not the end. Resistance is the beginning. Every act of healing begins with resistance. The psyche defends itself, projects, lashes out, but if the healer endures, if the presence remains steady, the defenses eventually crack and light seeps in. Healing presence does not work by force, but by persistence. It waits, it remains, et endure, and in its endurance, it transforms. Therefore, do not despair at hostility. Do not lament rejection. See them as signs that your presence has reached deep, that it has disturbed what needed to be disturbed. You are not responsible for the timing of their transformation. That belongs to the mystery of the soul. You are responsible only for remaining faithful to your own wholeness, for carrying your lantern steadily, for embodying the integration you have found. That is enough. For presence alone heals, even when it first wounds. And now we must turn to the deeper mystery, the truth that lies beneath all these paradoxes. Your healing presence feels like a threat to the broken, because it awakens the archetype of the self. And the self is not gentle. It is vast, numinous, terrifying, and beautiful. The self is the image of God within the psyche, the totality that includes all opposites. When it stirs, the ego trembles. The ego, fragile and narrow, cannot bear the immensity of the self without first undergoing death. This is why wholeness feels like annihilation to those who have not yet surrendered. It is not that they do not want to be healed. It is that they cannot yet imagine surviving the transformation that healing demands. And so they recoil. They mistake the self for an enemy, when in truth it is their deepest friend. But until they are ready, they will hate you for embodying it. This is the great loneliness of the healer, to carry within oneself the resonance of the self, and thus to walk misunderstood among those who have not yet glimpsed it. You are not only misunderstood, you are feared, and fear, when it cannot be admitted, disguises itself as hostility, contempt, or mockery. Many of you know this already. You have walked into rooms and felt the atmosphere shift, not because of what you said, but because of what you carried. You have seen eyes narrow, faces harden, tones sharpen, though you spoke nothing but kindness. This is the unconscious at work. They sense in you what they cannot face in themselves. They defend against it with attack. If you do not understand this, you will take it personally. You will grow weary, bitter, and tempted to hide your light. But if you see it for what it is, you will endure, knowing that the hostility is not the end, but the beginning of transformation. Let us turn inward for a moment, for it is not only others who experience your healing presence as threat. It is you too. Each time you approach greater wholeness, your own broken fragments resist. You may notice it in your own dreams, in which a luminous figure appears, and you recoil in terror. You may notice it in waking life, when you sabotage your progress, just as you approach a breakthrough. This is the same dynamic. Healing threatens the ego because it threatens the old identity. You too are broken, and you too resist your own healing. To recognize this is to remain humble. You are not above those who reject you. You are simply one who has walked further into the darkness, who has dared to endure a little more heat from the fire. This humility protects you from inflation. It reminds you that you are not the source of healing, you are only its vessel. The true source lies in the self, and the self belongs to all. Dreams reveal this with striking clarity. Again and again, the dream brings images of wholeness, mandalas, radiant children, wise old figures, sacred animals, and again, the dreamer fears them, resists them, wakes before they can embrace them. But the dreams return patient and insistent until the ego begins to soften. So too with your presence, you are a living dream image, a symbol walking in flesh. They may resist, they may flee, but the image will return, perhaps not in your presence, perhaps years later, perhaps in another form, but the seed is planted. The unconscious never forgets. And one day, when the soul is ready, it will remember. Your presence will become the catalyst of their awakening, even if they never tell you, even if you are long gone. This is the quiet work of the healer, often unseen, often unrewarded, yet profoundly real. The broken are not weak. Do not mistake their resistance for weakness. In their clinging to their wounds, they are protecting something sacred. Their timing, each soul has its own rhythm, its own kairos. To force healing upon one who is not ready is to violate the mystery of their path. Respect their timing, respect their resistance. It is part of their journey. Your task is not to make them heal, but to remain faithful to your own wholeness, so that when their time comes, they will have a living symbol to recall. Do not despair if they reject you. Do not despair if they curse you. Do not despair if they leave. You have played your role. You have carried the archetype into their field. The rest is not yours to control. Trust the unconscious, trust the self, trust the mystery that guides each soul toward its own integration. And what of you, the one who carries healing presence, how do you endure the loneliness, the hostility, the misunderstanding? You endure by remembering that you too are in process. You too are not finished. Your healing presence is not a static achievement, but a living journey. You must continue to descend into your own depths. Continue to face your own shadow. Continue to integrate your own contradictions. If you stop, you will stagnate and your presence will lose its authenticity. Healing presence is not a mask you wear. It is the natural radiance of ongoing integration. As long as you keep walking, keep wrestling, keep dying and being reborn, your presence will remain alive, and that aliveness is what heals, not perfection, not purity, not the absence of wounds, but the ongoing dance with them. So I tell you, embrace the paradox. Your healing presence is both threat and gift, both fire and water, both disruption and comfort. Do not try to resolve this paradox. Live it. Do not try to make all love you. Accept that some will hate you. Do not try to prove yourself innocent. Accept that you will be scapegoated. Do not try to erase your wounds. Accept that they are the very channels of your power. To embody healing is to live in tension, to carry opposites, to endure misunderstanding, and to trust that the deeper mystery is at work, beyond what you can see. And when you grow weary, when the hostility feels too great, when you long to retreat into hiding, remember this: the hostility itself is a sign that your presence is real. If you carried only a mask, no one would be disturbed. If you carried only empty words, no one would resist. Resistance is the proof that something deeper has been touched. So let their hostility be to you a reminder that you are alive, that you are embodying the archetype, that you are carrying the fire. And when you doubt, return to your own depths, return to your dreams, return to the quiet dialogue with your own unconscious. For there you will find again the source of your presence. There you will be renewed. There you will remember that you are not alone, that countless others have walked this path before you, that archetypes are eternal, and you are but their vessel. In the end, the broken will not remain broken forever. The psyche longs for wholeness, and though it resists, though it lashes out, though it clings to its wounds, it will not rest until it finds its way home. Your presence, even when hated, is part of this journey. You are the disturbance that awakens, the fire that burns, the mirror that reflects. Trust that this is enough. You do not need to see the fruit. You do not need to be thanked. You do not need to be understood. Healing presence is not about recognition. It is about fidelity. Fidelity to your own wholeness. Fidelity to the mystery. Fidelity to the self that guides all souls. This is your task, and it is holy. So I leave you with this. Do not hide your light. Do not dim your presence to protect the broken from their fear. Do not shrink to spare yourself their hostility. Stand firm. Shine gently. But shine, for though they may hate you now, though they may resist, though they may cast stones, The unconscious remembers, and one day, perhaps long after you are gone, the seed you planted will bloom, and in that blooming, they will know that your thread was their salvation, your presence, their path, your wholeness, their mirror, and then, though they may never speak it, their soul will whisper gratitude, and in that whisper, the mystery of healing will be complete.